DSI, TIA. I saw many friends from also other universities that, you are all welcome here today. As I said, I don't want to repeat yesterday, but I want to take a very, very important reflection, particularly on the way at which we coordinated the meeting yesterday. There was a seamless intertwining synergy between ourselves and the colleagues from the department. And Mr. Serrage was also quite instrumental in facilitating the middle of the day's function. So I want to thank him, and when I met him on the way out, close to 9 o'clock last night, and he was still here, very energetic, I said that perhaps this is good that we should continue. I need to know where you get your energy. And the CEO did quickly say that he doesn't drink, so I shouldn't think that he was pumped by the ARC's beautiful Pinotage red wine. So it had nothing to do with that. It was just pure adrenaline. So I thank everyone for yesterday, and I'm pretty sure today is going to even be better. We were still stressed yesterday because we were talking about things like sabbaticals, things like ARC in the 90s, ARC in the 2000s, and ARC now. But we will hear today a little bit more about where we want to be, because we've been where we were, and we know what we did right and what we did wrong, and where we need to be between ourselves and industry and the ministries for the betterment of our nation. So I have exhausted my 5.5 minutes, so I want to do a little bit of introduction. I won't read it, but what I know for sure is that Dr. Strobel is going to assist us introducing himself and give us his presentation. Other colleagues that will be presenting will be coming to the front during the interaction. Some of them are still coming, so I don't want to put people under pressure by making them to sit here in front today. So Aldo, if you don't mind, please come forward.
Professor Ndimba, thank you very much. You are our chief whip today, so we'll follow your lead. It's really a great pleasure to be here, colleagues. Thank you indeed for the kind invitation. Thank you for joining you in this very auspicious occasion. As Sonia has just said, probably a first for the country. Our challenges are stark. We know what the reality is. And we're trying to address all of those in a systemic way that is realistic and obtainable. And I think that is the basis of the discussions that are going on during these 3 days under the theme, Science Transforming Food Systems for a Better Future. We've just come out of the month of International Day of Education of the United Nations. I cannot think of two better constructs to go together as we forge this future going forward. Thank you very much, Chair of Council, Joeen, CEO of the ARC, Lita, and Petronella for the kind invitation. I'm Aldous Strubel. I'm now the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation, and Internationalization at the University of Mpumalanga. I serve on the board of the Water Research Council. I'm a former board member of the Agricultural Research Council, and was very pleased to have led the latest review of the ARC in 2020 and 2021. This provides us a framework, colleagues, for where we must focus, what is necessary, and what we will discuss today, science unleashing the transformative power of food systems. We want to take a strategic approach. We want to center the ARC within this context. We want to acknowledge the role of the ARC as one of the system actors, but certainly one of the most prominent system actors as we go forward. Let me please also acknowledge the co-presentation of this talk this morning with Professor Frans Swanepoel. He's the Chair in Sustainable Food Systems of Future Africa at the University of Pretoria, also a former ARC council member and deputy chair of council, and certainly this is a combined approach. Great apologies for him not being able to be here today. In the context of the talk, you see the outline there. So let's focus a little bit on what we mean by food systems outcomes and how that is contextualized within the mission and mandate of the Agricultural Research Council, and especially from a global construct of the food, energy, water nexus. We want to focus a little bit on what we think is an ideal food system for Africa, informed by approaches in South Africa. What are these impact areas that can unleash science within this construct? Critical component is partnerships for impact and how that links to a broader engagement and understanding of capacity advancement, and then a few recommendations, if one may. Let's start from the bat, colleagues. This is what we're speaking of. What are the food systems outcomes that we are speaking of? The OECD calls this the triple challenge of food systems transformations. And the three interlinked, intersecting components of these, of course, is food, nutrition, and health security, resource use and climate change, and livelihoods and rural development, and specifically in this context, for job creation. You can understand the complexity of the underlying factors that is perhaps in a simplistic way portrayed in these intersecting circles. But the triple challenges are far-reaching, has impact, and really influences economic development, economic advancement of any country or any region. As I've said, let's centralize the ARC in this context. You are all very well aware what the mandate, vision, and mission of this important organization is. But the intended outcome, I think, needs some focus. And that outcome states very clearly that there must be sustainable, transformed agricultural systems, as well as food and nutrition security. In the long view that the organization takes in its Vision 2050, there are 5 key overarching areas which embodies this vision and really brings to the center what these actions must be. And I'm going to repeat numerous times in a systemic, in a systems-orientated way, and that will be one of the major points of this talk, is how to do this in an integrated way. So genetic improvement of crops and livestock, the anticipation and migration, effects to enable resilience to climate change, the promotion of ecosystem sustainability, solutions, processes, and technologies to reduce post-harvest loss, and inclusive market-orientated agricultural development. That is an inclusive list of 5 highly strategic, highly directed action points for the organization to play the central role in what we call food systems transformation. But there's also a broader component of economic development linked to the National Development Plan. And briefly stated here, there is the acceptance that our resource use is unsustainable.
Sorry for that. This is your main slide. That one is behind. So they say that you are one slide ahead.
I'm getting ahead of one.
So apologies for that. Also, while I'm here, the farmers that are needing to go, the transports are waiting there where we were registering under the gazebo in front, just so that the transport won't leave you, but if you want to listen to Dr. Aldo, you can. But I think that one is also waiting outside. Thank you.
I have a tendency to get ahead of myself, so there's 2 screens here that you know, that's the reason. So one is the lead and one is the forward-looking one. Let's focus on the lead. So we are speaking about the ARC's alignment with the National Development Plan. And there is a great understanding and acceptance that the use of our resources is unsustainable. And this is beyond an economic argument. This is in the context of a sustainable food system that can play its role within a country, within a region. So of the identified 9 primary challenges, those 4 that are listed here have direct influence not only on the mandate and implementation framework of an organization like the Agricultural Research Council, it also links directly both backwards and forwards to how this organization and its stakeholders continue to support an integrated and sustainable food system. So we're speaking about the deficit in biocapacity, of ensuring environmental sustainability, of the income factor, this is the economic component, and of course an integrated and inclusive rural economy. So from my days in the leadership of the ARC, the current leadership, the potential future leadership, that question at the bottom remains. How is the organization aligned or positioned to address these challenges? And this is beyond governance aspects. This is beyond a role to do good research or to produce publication outputs or to support students. This is a fundamental shift and reorientation of a lead organization in close collaboration with many other system actors in how a consolidated national plan of action is followed, is implemented, and is attained. The food component is complex, colleagues, and there are numerous challenges. Firstly is the interpretation of what it means and what it is. It is multidimensional, yet there is no clarity on how to operationalize systems thinking with sustainable agriculture, food systems, livelihoods, and climate research. We find in much of our research, in much of the actions in the country, that there is a siloed approach, but the systems integration process is what is lacking for us to see rapid advancement and rapid impact in the investment that we made. Therefore, food must be understood as an interdisciplinary concept. At the center of that interdisciplinary concept is the intersection disciplines or systems, health and humans and the planet. There is also several major systems that connect and intersect but are often overlooked and inadequately accounted for. So that's our challenge statement. Food sometimes is seen in an isolated way and not in the interdisciplinary, multi-dimensional construct that it is. To understand this complexity, all of the intersecting dimensions or systems must be considered. And this and specific action points was one of the major sets of recommendations that emanated from the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021. And we are very pleased as a country that South Africa and indeed the ARC played a leading role in the conceptualization, positioning, and crafting of the recommendations from that prominent conference. So it is contextualized by the Sustainable Development Goals, and those recommendations and the construct of our development goals is assisting scientists towards systemic research by providing a framework, a common understanding, and what our common goals is. So with your permission, that is perhaps one of the first markers of this presentation. Understanding adequately the food system, its complexity, and what the role of stakeholders should be within that complexity. There's a bigger construct around this, the water, energy, food nexus. And this is a construct that is easily used these days. But as with the food system and its complexity, the complexity of that interaction between these 3 dimensions are often not clearly understood. And perhaps even more starkly is the intersection of the system of food and the system that is portrayed by understanding of what the water, energy, food nexus is. As a water-scarce country, South Africa, with little arable land and dependence on oil imports, our country's economy is testing the limits of our resource constraints. And hence, what has frankly been completely absent is this understanding of what nexus policymaking is and what it implies. Because that provides the overarching strategic framework for alignment, for planning, for coordination, and more importantly, from that policy perspective, what the impact scenarios are. What are the catapults to take us further from where we currently are? This example links to the water, food, energy nexus, and it's a comparison just with two dimensions, well, three dimensions, water, food, energy, between South Africa and Brazil. So briefly, water abundance and energy resources go hand in hand, usually. In Brazil, there is water, fresh water availability of 44,000 cubic meters per person. That implies that over 80% of the country's energy mix is hydropower, and it also supports great capacity for agricultural production on this large scale. And hence, food exports consists of 35% of the total of exports of that country. So we're speaking not energy as such, we're speaking about the availability of natural resources and the adequate use of Brazil in supporting the food system. There's a great contrast to South Africa, which is not a water abundant country, but it has large coal reserves, and hence our energy mix is still very much focused on fossil fuels. And hence we see that 6% of total imported goods are food and 9% of total exported goods are food. And I think that is a stark reality, colleagues, about the complexity and the interrelationship about the availability of resources, the adequate and insightful use of the resources, and how that is applied within a policy perspective. This is probably one of the first times, colleagues, that this proposed conceptual framework for an African or South African food system is presented. It was developed towards the end of last year and will be published within this next month. And this is based on work by the Food Systems Network in Africa at the University of Pretoria with external funding and linked to a number of chairs in the food system domain at the university. So there are great influences, as you see from the top. The dimensions of the biophysical influence, sociocultural, economic, social, and of course, technological. And these are the drivers. These are the reality components within each country or within each region. If one looks then at the food system regime or the governance of that component, on the left, external natural influence like the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the geosphere, etc. A food system, I must just add, is not just pertained to a country, it is also a global phenomenon. And every country, regardless of how small or resource poor, is part of a global system of food transformation. On the right-hand side, the supporting aspects like human capital, natural capital, physical, etc. And those are regulated or interpreted by that middle component, coordination, by the regulatory environment, normative, cognitive, etc. The food system actors that interprets and implements this construct of the food system is all the actors in the value chain. And broadly speaking, they've been clustered in two parts. One are those in the food supply component on the left, and those in the food demand component of the right. Massive discussion on food loss and waste within this process, linked to all the multidimensional factors of the physicality of production, but also the policy of supply and demand. And that leads us to the proposed food system outcomes that one would want to see, and that was the first slide of this presentation, and what the influence is on food and nutrition security, on livelihoods, on environmental sustainability. So you know what the components of these are. But again, this is the first time where this is interpreted in an integrated way for us to understand what the impact of one factor would be on the outcome pathways of some of the other factors and vice versa. We want to speak now, colleagues, on certain impact areas that is using science to unleash the transformative power of innovation. And many of these are linked to what the ARC is doing. In fact, we chose 4 examples of current and highly innovative programs, both national and international, that the organization is involved in to address many of the components in this food system. And it is clearly understood also that one retains the perspective of the long view, of the 2050 long view, strategic directions, outcomes of the organization as these are discussed. Firstly, and that is one of the first points in the 2050 vision, is the focus or work on genetic innovation, and specifically in this case on livestock. So we are all aware, if you are not, I'm very happy that you are aware now and in your participation in this conference, that the ARC has developed and is currently running probably one of the most sophisticated livestock improvement schemes on the continent, arguably globally. It looks at all the dimensions of animals, and it utilizes genetic and management information to advise breeders, farmers, producers, and other role players to be more efficient, resilient, and sustainable. It is also linked very closely to the Livestock Recording and Genetic Information System, INTEGRIS, which the ARC is managing and implementing on behalf of the department. The very prominent KYD program that places all these responsibilities squarely for impact within a smallholder farming system is highly commendable. And this links very closely to the established systems, and the impact has been extraordinary. So colleagues, this is the first example of how science really is transforming impact within the food system and what the ARC is responsible for. The second one also on genetic innovation, but specifically on crops. And this is globally a well-known program which has been cited by the Gates Global Goalkeepers report, inter alia. It includes a large number of prominent international partners continentally and internationally, and also works very closely with the private sector through Monsanto. The hybrid seed for maize called Droughtigo was developed in 2014. This has been acknowledged by that highly influential commentary from the Gates Global Goalkeepers report. 30% of calorie intake for people in sub-Saharan Africa is maize. This has a direct impact on that nutrition, on that availability of easy-growing maize, and it is currently rolled out to all maize-producing countries in Africa. Alex, there is a second example of the extraordinary power of science, of what an organization with partners are doing in implementing that responsibility. The second focus is cross-cutting across the 5 implementing areas of the ARC with respect to its Vision 2050. And that specifically is to enable resistance to climate change. There's a summary of the importance and the severe impact of what climate change has on production, on consumption for that matter. And many say we're heading towards a climate crisis. My feeling is we're already inside the climate crisis. You will be aware that for the first time we've exceeded now the 1.5 degree global warming limit that has been set a number of years ago. But not only linked to its mandate or its implementation plan, the ARC is providing leadership in all these services listed there and is really playing a prominent role in addressing the climate crisis. And then the last one is the newest, also multi-partner, inter alia, the NRF equivalent of the UK Research and Innovation, University of Pretoria, and the Alliance for Research Universities in Africa, that focuses on effective data technology for quality monitoring and logistic decision support in cold chains, of fresh agricultural products. And Dr. Chabinuka is playing a leading role in that process. This focus specifically using technology to reduce post-harvest loss. And as you've seen from the diorama, the proposed model for an integrated food system, food loss and waste is probably one of the most major negative outcomes of the food system that inhibits the adequate provision of resources to those that need it. These examples, colleagues, was intended to bring prominence to this concept of science within a food system, what the leading role could and should be of an organization in a country that is in general resource poor, but is showing great strides and great intent to have that impact. And this brings us to this notion of how we do this together. And Partnerships for Impact has some resonance with the work that has been done, but the intention would be to expand this significantly for the successful implementation of the goals. The IRC is going through a change process. It is very clear on its plans and its direction. It is very clear on its intent to work together. And the conference yesterday to tomorrow is one of the indicators of that. But without going through the detail of what you see on the slide, the basis of a highly strategic partnership strategy linked to common and shared outcomes will be critical for all the role players that was here yesterday, for all the role players that are here today, for us to have a consolidated and integrated way forward with respect to solving and addressing challenges within the food system. So we must understand what all are working for through a common agenda. There must be shared measurement so that everyone can see their place and determine their contribution. It must be an integrated approach, so for instance, mutually reinforcing activities. A commercial culture that implies innovation, clear financial accountability, financial resilience, and the generation of social value within an established framework of value and principles that critically, colleagues, balances commercial ambitions with positive outcomes for the community. This is not a theoretical framework. These can be regarded as action points for us to be engaged within an integrated food system. That brings us, as we've said, to the 5 major areas that the ARC is focusing on. That was matrixed with success indicators or impact focus areas of what science is doing. But the capacity to build capacity to attain this rather difficult and trying challenges that we have should be seen in context that capacity is way beyond skills acquirement or just training. It is also the innovation that that capacity brings within institutions, within organizations, within the system. So the rather dated notion of understanding capacity just as training or skills development has been futed for a few years now. But as an ARC, as our system capacity needs to be advanced. The ARC, in a sense, has taken the lead with 2 major initiatives. One was the professional development program that you are aware that really looked well after building that next generation of agricultural research scientists and technicians within a growing organization. And a highly effective one that perhaps has not moved as fast as it should is the Center of Cooperation model that really tries to link the ability, knowledge and skills that is available within higher education and universities to a public research institution like the Agricultural Research Council. This is also closely linked, colleagues, when the ARC sees its bigger role within the National Development Plan. So yes, it's got its organizational goals, but it is a public good organization. So technically, and yes, it does, it must adhere, implement and achieve those goals set by the National Development Plan. And this is a wide ask from creating jobs investment in agricultural technologies, expanding a college system within the broad agricultural sector to focus on improving quality, the necessary skills development and training, of course. And quite critically, and this has been the bane of South Africa's agricultural development policy over a number of years, innovative means for agricultural extension and training by the state in partnership with other role players. And the role players that were here yesterday, that are here today, is diverse, but the ask is that there must be coherence and integration within this way forward. We are very pleased that one of the striking examples that the ARC is highly involved in was initiated by the Academy of Sciences Consensus Study report in 2017, which I was very pleased to serve on, and Professor Swanepoel was the chairperson of that panel, on revitalizing agriculture education and training in South Africa, that has made highly strategic recommendations of the role that the ARC should play inter alia, among many other system actors, I must add, within attaining these goals linked to them from the National Development Plan. It is a founding document that has been politically accepted, that has been signed off by the current Minister of Agriculture, and that is currently being implemented. And some of the major recommendations are the strong linkages and feedback mechanisms between provincial departments of agriculture, universities, the ARC. Secondly, collaboration between system actors, as Professor Ndimba has said at the beginning, Department of Science and Innovation, the National Research Foundation, the ARC, and also the extraordinary initiatives like the Centers of Cooperation. Secondly, the reinvigoration of an agricultural innovation system within the country, primarily first at the ARC, and the trickle effect to that, to the system. One of the more important recommendations, and this was completed while Joanne Isaacs was still head of Department of Agriculture in the Western Cape, is the articulation pathways, specifically focused on the extraordinary success inter alia in the Western Cape between Elsenburg and Stellenbosch University. And when one speaks of capacity development at a strategic level, that probably is still, I might add, the lead example of how effective articulation can bring this combination of agricultural research, extension, and training and education together within a seamless system. And we've developed at that time what we call the ideal agricultural education and training model. So if you follow from the left, what is that supportive environment with all the system actors, together with the right institutional mix in a country, all the higher education institutions, with adequate resources, more than just funding, that produces graduates with the right and appropriate mix of skills and their level to meet in adequate numbers the sector demand that is necessary, to fill the needs and the needed roles in the sector with direct benefits for smallholder farmers, including indirect benefits that ultimately has as its goal an increased agricultural productivity environment for smallholder farmers and the agricultural sector as a whole. Of course, with all the strong linkages and feedback mechanisms from all the role players that you see at the bottom. And colleagues, we're not speaking about capacity building and training in isolation of what we speak of as an effective food system that must be transformed. This is an integrated system training the next generation to be part, to have adequate skills and experience, to add value to the food system for better attainment of the goals. I want to mention briefly that in the implementation of this process, there are a number of markers that has been indicated of what exactly the focus areas or points are or should be that must be implemented. Two of these are critical. Number one is to build the education, training, research, and extension capacity. And number two is the national coordination that links very closely to identifying what the system barriers are, and through national coordination, try to solve these aspects. And this brings us to the last part, and a sterling example of what one of the outflows of this consensus study report and the recognition at a ministerial level and the ARC central involvement in this is. And this is a program that is currently being implemented called SARI, Strengthening Agricultural Research and Innovation. It is a multidimensional program that is currently piloted in 3 provinces. The lead province currently is the Mpumalanga province, with close collaboration between the ARC's institute there, the University of Mpumalanga, and the Provincial Department of Agriculture. The intent would be to, as a first step, attain and formalize what we call a rural hub of all system actors, and analyze the constraints between development, agriculture, education, and training, commodity, and production that is specific to each of the provinces. Number 2 is to strengthen the uptake capacity of research results to enhance the impact of agricultural research and education within all system actors of that province, to establish a knowledge management system to effectively monitor that. We must say in this national approach there's good examples of monitoring systems, but none at this stage are effective or nuanced enough to serve as that knowledge management monitoring system to pick up challenges early. And to very closely and in parallel pick up agricultural extension support to enhance the effectiveness and training of extension officials. This will, as from the rest of this year, be rolled out in the Limpopo province and from early next year in the Northwest province. So colleagues, this speaks to a number of aspects. Number 1, the policy outcome, the will, the informative approach of science, that this was led initially by the Academy of Science of South Africa, that this was quite willingly and openly picked up by system actors like the Agricultural Research Council, by many universities, and the policy support. I want to say tongue-in-cheek, the political support, but let's call it policy support, because that is where the sustainability in support will remain and not change with a new administration. There's a common understanding of the challenges of what we mean by sustainability in our agricultural sector, in the food system, and what is the capacity that links to this. All of these dimensions come together not only in the SARI initiative, but this is one of the major and prominent initiatives that will finally bring us together, learn from a pilot approach, and then eventually and hopefully put this together for a national framework. So we want to decrease the weakness of institutions that participate within this agricultural system of each province. There must be regional structures to support the intent, and especially bringing into the fold, as the Western Cape has so well shown, in a so-called land grant model, the integration of support of agricultural extension officers linked to research by universities, other institutions, and linked to the implementation and education component of that. Colleagues, it is really critical for the ARC to lead this clarion call, to be the central coordinator, prominent actor for food systems transformation. It will certainly not do so in isolation, and again, the example of this conference shows clearly what the intent to a nuanced, insightful, smart partnership model is, to have a collective approach for us to go forward. As part of the review 3 years ago, but also from interested parties that analyzes continuously the IRC's vision, its performance, its implementation. This list of highly strategic, integrated, high-level interventions are already in play. The intention would be to make them smart, to make them effective, and to take them beyond only the ARC. So if one speaks of One Health, who are the system actors, if one speaks to nutrition-sensitive agriculture or climate-smart agriculture, what is the digital revolution that will assist us to help us attain our goals faster, etc. So again, all of these aspects are in play. The question would be, how does it relate and support to the food system? What is the strategic outcomes with speed, with effectiveness? And how can we really reorganize the resources that we have? Not necessarily more, because we know that will be the reality, there will not be more, but smarter in this context. Colleagues, as a final word, there is significant potential for alignment coordination. We've seen this with the outstanding examples. We've seen that in the impact only through the few examples that were shown, and we are aware that we can go forward and faster. But a major aspect for me, and a slight criticism, is the systems approach with the department and other role players that are not at its best. That certainly must be seen as a sector approach and not as a single siloed approach by some system actors. You had 99% of these system actors yesterday in this room, and many stayed today. I trust, and I heard it is the case, that there is some commitment, some understanding, some advancement now of that intent to really partner strategically for us to have a consolidated approach. But this must be done centrally with the department, with an understanding of that sector approach and the challenge, and that we speak of the food system as one of the ultimate goals of attainment for development of the country, for improved quality of life. Very pleased that the SARI project will be a small role player in moving forward and to show some intent and, I trust, great success in how we can integrate for advancement of the food system. Thank you very much, colleagues.
What a keynote. Aldo, please, before you go, I would really ask the audience to just give you another more deserving round of applause, please. Can you please stand? Once also, before you go, there is something in Springbok, if those who follow rugby, they call it the bomb squad. They are substitutes, but they are in for a purpose. I don't think you did Professor Swanepoel any injustice. In fact, I feel that this also was a good reason that he couldn't make it, because we got we have some talks from him, and I think as I was sitting there, because now I'm wondering, I haven't spoken to you in a while, and realized that there are some typos in our program that now that I see also UMP. And I just quickly checked with my contacts and realized that since last time we spoke, you are now a professor at DVC at the University of Mpumalanga, which is actually talking to almost everything you spoke about. And I could pick it up during your presentation that when I introduced you as a super partner to the ARC, as a funder when you were still at the NRF, as a leader when you were in our council, as an examiner when you were in our institutional review. And now I feel the partnership that we are definitely going to forge, because we don't have to persuade you about why the ARC should be partners with your university in particular, and in general other universities. We talk about this quite a lot. The ARC is not a university. The ARC does not want to be a university, at least if I don't contradict. We do, though, provide skills. We educate in agriculture probably as many PhDs and masters, more than any other university. And we don't want to be in competition with the universities. And the partnership theme that you kept on talking about here is exactly for us to take away our silo mentalities, our super competitiveness, which sometimes is unhealthy. That an ARC scientist, to me, I see them different to a university scientist. There are areas of overlap, but in particular, I see an ARC scientist, a super scientist at the ARC, a super researcher, as a person who's closer to the farmer, closer to the food production. And then we can provide more support for blue sky research, basic research, for the colleagues at the universities to get our theoretical research. We do applied research. Somewhere in between, we can always have a good, healthy cooperation. So I am very, very pleased to hear that. And as a DVC, we also have these new MOUs, where with these hundreds and dozens of masters and PhD students that we are graduating, sometimes 90%, 100% with the ARC resources, how can we share that credit fairly? I mean, you need to tick that you are a leading producer of postgraduates, out of the new universities in particular. Historically disadvantaged universities don't have as many resources as the historically privileged universities. The ARC, fortunately and coincidentally, we are geographically close to some major centers. I collaborate with UWC. I am still a professor there. I collaborate with Stellenbosch University, CBUT, UCT to some degree. So we want to do that because our credits also to deliver to the DSI's mandate, we need to do that more. But I think what you're talking about, the food, energy, and water nexus, I think we also need to have that ARC universities, DELRAT nexus, and find a sweet spot where we can make the circle literally bigger. And Mr. Serache has actually added a catalyst. And we are here because we started to break that tension. And I hope that we will follow through, and thank you very much. We'll be in touch. Professor Ludidi joined you around the same time, a good friend of mine as a dean. So with our institute there, I'm sure we'll meet and do some business immediately, almost. Thank you very much. Thank you. Without any further ado, there is a theoretical front room phobia syndrome. The lady that came did actually what I was about to say to everyone who came relatively after we've started, that the people that are editing our videos and projecting, it doesn't look very lacquer when the front seats are empty. So can I challenge as a scientist those people that prove that they don't have a front room phobia to please come to the front? I'm not asking, I am insisting that please can some of people sitting at the back come and fill here, please? You can move with your bag as we are moving to the next speaker. I would be happy to get that. It is really not looking good for those who are watching from outside. Can I ask, Justin, can you start? Can you recruit people to come to the front desk, please? Please. I think that the current session also has evolved a little bit. I am supposed to have Mr. Tlachwayo to join me, Dr. Mojapelo, Dr. Nengovela, Mr. Roo from Wageningen, and Dr. Jafta, another super sub. So here now we have our bomb squad, and we are going to try and entertain you for the next couple of hours or so. And I will really not try to do what other facilitators do to try and repeat what everybody has said. I think it will really sometimes not doing good justice. I had to do that for Aldo, Professor Strubel, and for the reasons that I already gave. So I will then move on with my program as suggested by the organizers. Yeah. The current session is on farmer development and MEL. I have to learn what does MEL stand for. There's been lots of abbreviations here, but it's also part of the mystery of today's function. We're all gonna learn every day. So can I, without wasting further time, I can see that I have received some customers moving forward very quietly, and then give over to Mr. Hlachoyo to start and present and the audience. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll just try to cut by half here to another half.
Thank you, Prof. Nimba. Sanbonani, good morning. My name is Pendugan Hlachoyo. I work in the Presidency Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. I'm one of the directors there. My work is to monitor the implementation of Chapter 5 and Chapter 6 of the National Development Plan, which is environment part and rural economy part. Okay, this is the content of my presentation. I won't be very long, colleagues. Introduction, I'll touch a little bit on ERRP as well as the government priorities because we are duty bound to talk about those issues. I have a few objectives, material and method, and then I'll spend most of the time on the result and discussion. We chose those 5 elements. Oh, which one?
The main.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh, okay. I'm looking at the 2 screens there, but they said I must look at the main one. I'm Pendugan Hlachoyo. As I've said, on this we collaborated with the Professors Aful, Michael Antwi, as well as Professor Rudolph from UJ. The first 2 are from UNISA. They are in a way my PhD supervisors. The topic is monitoring the impact of government-funded agricultural interventions towards the National Development Plan 2030 aspiration, which is very clear. 3 issues were identified: poverty, unemployment, as well as poverty, unemployment, and inequality. As government, if whatever we are doing or these agencies, we cannot pinpoint to addressing those issues, I don't think the minister would be happy with us, nor the president. Whatever we do, we should see in the community where I'm from, 50 people out of poverty. We cannot just talk in abstract for a longer period. I think that is the gist of it. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, I must, next one. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is the content. I've already talked about content without wasting the time. Okay, the introduction, as I've said, NDP is very clear, integrated and inclusive economy involving expansion of agricultural activity. Expansion does not mean hectares, but you can do in a little bit, but the productivity can be seen. So monitoring of impact, again, we do not have to reinvent the wheel. The GTZ is very clear. Less emphasis on planning, concentrate on socio-cultural changes. That is what I've just said. We can do whatever we can, but if we cannot say that woman there whose husband passed away because of HIV with 5 children can buy the children shoes to go to school, then we are nowhere to be seen. DDG Serache yesterday talk about butterflies. If we cannot say those butterflies, they help the maze of people in Khampahlele there to do the pollination, then we are, I don't know, what can I say? But then there's also a white paper on agriculture, which is very clear. Agriculture is a major factor in rural economic growth. We cannot put factories in agriculture, but they have land. If we use that land properly, we can see rural development. And then US aid, I won't read anything. agriculture is central to fostering economic growth, reducing poverty, and improving food security in Southern African region. More than 70% of rural population depend on agriculture on their livelihood. If we cannot capitalize on that too, because we need to deal with poverty. 70% of people are in agriculture. If we cannot capitalize on that, then God knows what we can do. So, as part of introduction, we in the presidency, we should assist the departments. We should ensure, because I think the time is gone now to point fingers, because we are all government people. We cannot be happy to go to cabinet and say department is not performing well. The leadership will just say, what have you done to support them? Okay, the next one, this one was presented to cabinet by the department, the big shot of the department. Also, we are monitoring this one. I mean, you cannot just present things to cabinet, but what I like is at the end there, it talks about measure the impact of AAMP intervention in the sector. That is what we will be working with the department to help each other to measure that impact. Okay, these are government priorities. The president was very clear. I won't take very long. He said for this administration that is ending soon, these are priorities. I won't read them all. I can make them available to you. They are freely available anyway. And then there is economic recovery that was adopted after the COVID to say we must recover our economy. Okay, the objective of the study was to assess the implementation of selected major agricultural initiative towards the NDP 2030 aspiration, assess the value for money for this project, and advise on viability and on this intervention. Value for money, the Treasury will call us on things that talk to agriculture as well as environment. We want to cut. Where must we cut? They're not even referring to the department. The DPME, we want to cut. The Department of Agriculture, where must we cut? Then we cannot just be, like myself, a Zulu man, just point things. We must be systematic. We must be systematic and say, we think here it's not working, or this is the issue, cut there. We cannot come with, hey, no, not like that. The value for money, it's very important, colleagues. If it is your money, you put R1 there, you definitely must get something. Or unless you are using a husband, even if your husband, because it's your money. Or boy, okay, I'm told I'm being controversial. Okay, and then the other things, the viability now, as scientists, we must be honest with ourselves rather than anyone. Are these projects viable? Can we do alternative things? Okay, the material and method, as I said, 6 agricultural projects located in 4 provinces. Those provinces were chosen because they align with the former homelands, and that is where poverty is. We collected the data, we project officers from each project, agricultural advisors, as well as farmers who are impacted by those. This is not the traditional research where you have 3 replicates at 5%, but this is the actual work on the field. Okay, then we start with, can I get some water, please? Can I drink this? Sorry. Oh, that's yours, Doc, thanks. Okay. Sorry. No, I won't take that much on this one, but I will drive some issues home. You see, what we find on the infrastructure, we as government, I'm not talking about department now, as government, we've done a lot for this project. When we talk about fencing, irrigation, we've put there the roads that lead to them, but some irrigation are becoming older, but they are there. However, there is the evidence of underutilization. In some areas, about 50% is not being used. When we visit, people talk, which is very good. But you can see that, oh, this is being done because we are visiting. Yeah, those are issues that we looked at. Since 2016, about 6 years ago, in one project, government has spent 14 million in some of these projects, on tractors, electricity. This averaged to 2.3 million per annum. So above this, there are other issues that were done, the pumps, the reservoir, office, and storage. The question will be, it's fine, we've invested, but are we getting something out of it? Because, colleagues, I must also say, it's not given that agriculture will get money from Treasury. This government that is here now, the taxi bosses are looking at the government. The fathers and mothers who sell magwinya at school, they want government support. It is us, as government people, as all of us here, to justify our existence. Okay, on the production issues, that is where we are worried. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a crop scientist in a way. In some areas, good agricultural practices, the basic issues are not being followed. Like soil sampling, proper fertilization, and planting time. For example, in Zanyokwe, the Eastern Cape, a very good maize was planted. Very good one, but it was in January. But when we probe further, they plant SC Seedcore 603, which is a variety that needs the full season. I mean, I learned that. I worked in Sedara about, 15 years ago when I started, because those varieties, they have animals like the rabbit. It is quick. That one is an elephant, it's long. So those are the basic things as the technician I should know when I advise. When we cannot do those things, the DG Serache said money is not a problem. Sometimes it's not the problem of the money. It's the problem of the attitude. I pin it to supervisors of us, the scientists and extension. As the supervisor of the agricultural technicians at Ngutu, I would not give you fertilizer unless you give me soil samples. To say, I need 20 bags of fertilizer, I will ask you based on what? And I will definitely not give you. I'll tell you that people in that ward, they will hit you and they will come to me. I'll tell them that you are not giving me so that I can help you. Okay, so again, the average land, when we measured one of the irrigation schemes, is 1.6 per hectare per member. That is what Tomlinson Commission said in 1957. 1957. Maybe we are not aware, but these are issues that we should say, is this enough for the current population? Maybe it's the question of land, because if you have that small land and more people show interest, what else can you do? But these are the issues that we did pick up. 320,000 income for a year from vegetable sales, and then they are doing the extra land preparation for the municipality for 150 hectares. Members averaging 2,100 per year per member, or 177 per month per member. I mean, where are we getting? Because after we've supported, we have economists in government, we have economists in ARC, we should crunch the numbers and be honest with ourselves. Is it working? Or we will be looking for more money, more money, more money. I don't think it's fair. We don't think it's fair. And I've said the money is not getting more. It's getting less in the fiscus. So now, our statistics, Stats SA, they said 561 should be the basic minimum, or they call it extreme poverty line. But here we are with the government. with, in that particular project, 177 per month. And then the World Bank, they do have their own measure, $1.9 per day. But then we're not blaming anyone, but we're saying, as this policy, are we on our game or our focus is somewhere else? So identifying the market before the production, it's not happening. That is what we're told as extension when we start extension work, that first identify the market before the people plant. You do not wish for better. But then again, in that district, there was the district market, and then I heard that it folded down because the farmers, they said that market was helping us very well because it just take the whole thing at once, and then we focused on production. Okay, farmers support, we find that it is present. The extension officers are there together with the FPS use manager. In KZN, we find that the department or the government employ the well-qualified FPSU managers, which is very good in a way. Tractor seed and fertilizers are there as a support to farmers. But then, from experience again, what we normally do for audit purposes, AG, we give a farmer 1 bag of fertilizer, we make him sign, we've supported that farm. That is one way, or it is not the good way of supporting, because it's signed, the ID is there, boom, supported. But is our support proper and lead towards what we want to do? In some areas, farmers use free water as per DWS regulation. In other areas, farmers are battling, like in Taung there, they were complaining to us to say, we are really battling with the water bill. But when we visited KZN, they said, no, we are using the DWS Black Farmer Scheme, which help a lot. Okay, I have 5 minutes. I'll be finishing now. Economics, the biggest problem in this project. Why we can't link them into the bigger government scheme? Minister Motshekga was saying that the school feeding scheme is what, $1 trillion or more market. I mean, we just fail to talk to each other to say we start here and then we go forward. I'm almost done. This is the real example, colleagues. This is the real example in one of the areas where sunflower was planted. You have a literature from DAF that tells you what you must do for sunflower. ARC, there is a literature there as well as the Grain SA. It is there that if you have not taken soil samples, how should you fertilize? Okay, this is the scenario 1. This is for 200 hectare area. They said the maximum yield you need to supply a crop with 140 kgN. But then I'm going towards the end there. We only supply 200 bags instead of 4,200 bags. We as government are saying to N, those who are in crop science, they know that N nitrogen is the factory. If you cannot get those leaves green, we cannot manufacture anything. So we only give them 5% of what is needed. But then the 200 hectares is planted. If AG come and measure 200 hectares is there, tick, the government is doing the job. But are we helping them to get what they're supposed to do? This is the second scenario. I'm just finishing. Scenario number 2, again, the Grain SA will talk to you that when you do crop rotation with the crops that fix nitrogen, this is what fertilizer you need. It is there that as the junior scientist or extension officer, I can read. But then when we ask the question, because we do not ask direct, like, do you do crop rotation? What we were planting last year, sunflower. This year is sunflower. What are you planning to plant is sunflower. So there is no rotation there. If there was rotation, a little bit of nitrogen would have been saved. We supply 200 bags, which is 12.5% of what is needed. but then there was no rotation. Again, farmer support, we are supporting farmers. I even joked to say, that thing was very big. I would be camping there literally, because if we can get that thing right, half of the problem will be solved. So now, towards the end, rational advice. Should we not do little and do it better? Or other advice, we want to be seen to be doing more? Does the two scenarios show commitment in supporting the farmers toward food security and commercialization? That is the question I'm just asking. Okay, the impact, I'll talk, impact is not showing there. Maybe it is no, but it is not reported. But we are not looking for big bang. I've said if you can prove that that community that had no hope, with us being there, it is something that is happening. Let me just show you this one. You see, this is what the NWGA did in Eastern Cape in the former Transkei. You can see it's showing impact. We as government through CASP funded, but we asked someone to implement. This is their report. Household children going to hungry bed, 10 years, they were 41, they've come down to 24. What more would you want? Household with saving account, you can see the figures. We're not looking for the big bang theory, but small things. And then I'm going to recommendations quickly. Specialist, where is my old friend Dr. Tindisa here? No. I always say when we talk, because he's my friend, please let's go in there as economists and try and quantify as much as we can. When we report to Cabinet, we go to Cabinet twice a year on what we call PAO. When we report about agriculture, President likes to listen to agriculture. Further in-depth evaluation, or I will say a war room at the national level, that will look at this mega project from beginning to end and we'll report on them. I'm done, Doc, sorry. Departmental entities, NAMC and ARC, maybe they should get involved. Proper reporting by department will ensure that all stakeholders are informed and are aware of status of agriculture and system. In South Africa, universities, development organization, government, and the grassroots organization, we should all work together towards the common goal. And to conclude, the government intervention is project follow-up to ensure efficient usage of resources. Technical support by the national office is lacking. And transferring of fund, because we transfer fund and then maybe we do not follow new model for funding, maybe it is needed, and the implementation of planning, monitoring, and evaluation. The question is, NDP aspiration through agriculture is the data is talking, not me, unlikely to be realized, and I thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Mr. Tlatshwayo, from the DPME. That's the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, which is, if you understand the government system in South Africa, these are located, this department is located in the presidency. We have a panel that will reflect a bit on the topic at hand, as well as drawing from some of the input from Mr. Tlatshwayo. We have with us Mr. Majapelo from the Limpopo Department of Agriculture. Welcome. We have Dr. M. Roofs from Wageningen University. Thank you. And then online we also have Dr. Manguela from the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And then we have Mr. Disebile, if I got it right? Not? Is he not in? No, doesn't seem like it. And then, oh, you were not present. Thank you, sir. From the FAO. and my colleague from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Dr. Nengovela. Colleagues, this session focuses on farmer development. I think in the first presentation given, or the keynote given by Dr. Strubel, it was the complexity of the food system was clearly outlined, and the need for us to really understand the food, water, and energy nexus. And within the understanding of the complexity of the food system and wanting to bring about transformation of that food system, farmer development and support is obviously extremely key. And therefore, I would like the panel members to reflect on their experiences on farmer development, give a view on the input from Mr. Hlatshwayo, and perhaps also share some detailed recommendations. Panel members, I know you have not been asked to make a presentation, so perhaps just initial views, and then we will also, after this, give an opportunity to to yourselves as participants here today. This session will extend until 11:30. So with your interventions and your questions, if you could bear that in mind. Thank you. Let me call upon, let's go according to the list. Mr. Majapelo, if you'd like to come to the podium and just share and give some perspective on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all. With regard to the topic on development, enterprise development for farmers, the experience that I'll actually share with you is that as a country, and following the programs that had happened in our country post-1994 on land redistributions, land reform, and so forth, we seems to be having a very good capacity in terms of land for production. Though we have water problem, land is one of our strengths that we have, and institutionally as a country, we've got a strong base in respect of the technical know-how, the strength on research, with the likes of ARC and its collaboration with the provincial departments of agriculture on programs, capacity with the tertiary institutions that we collaborate with as government as well to support the farmers for the same vision and shared vision. However, when it comes to injection of capital, that's where our farmers seems to be appreciating more of that particular tangible intervention and run quickly beyond the issues of proper planning for the projects to be sustainable, guided by evidence that we have in respect of research, focusing on the capacity of the area. You'll find that we support farmers and we invest highly on a particular, that naturally as that particular province we don't have strength on. For example, we will actually build huge capacity for production in poultry in a province in Limpopo when we are not necessarily strategically positioned naturally as a grain province. And then we actually see collapse of those particular projects. So we need to measure and appreciate the strength that we have, complement what we actually have. And investment before money can be released to projects. We must have proper plans, proper business plans developed, convincing or bankable business plans, not rush into developing projects that will ultimately collapse, as Mr. Tlatswai was actually demonstrating to us. And that will actually require a collective and collaborative approach. We see ourselves now doing things better in respect of our collaborations with the ARC, particularly on the livestock area under Kaunafajo, where we certainly have to ensure that we do the physical assessment and technical assessment of projects before we can be able to invest anything on. And we actually build capacity of the farmers. We train them before we support them. And then so that they have a better understanding of the challenge ahead. Because our farmers sometimes believe that when you actually get a farm through land reform or any other program, you lease farm from state, you are already rich and a land cruiser is guaranteed. Forgetting that agriculture is a science. You need to have a certain level of knowledge for that business that you are going to get into, and you need to understand also the economic part, the economics part, financial management part that is required for you to be able to run it sustainably. And I think that is one of those areas that we are happy when we see ourselves as government departments collaborating with academic institutions, with funding institutions and research institutions, and we see substantial success in that area. One example of that project is the Nguni project that we're doing with IDC and universities in provincial departments. We actually succeeded in that because we did not only bring technocrats into this. There was a lot of research work that was done, and there was also an input from people who actually are masters or subject master expert in financing. So that saw us actually succeeding, and even our approach to support the farmers. Assessment was stringent. We actually had a lot of criticism from the public to say you are anti-revolutionary because you expect farmers to be owning 600 hectares of land for them to benefit. But that very same criteria ensured the sustainability of the project and of that intervention, than whereby every person feel entitled to benefit, and they come forth and then they just benefit for the sake of benefiting. So in any way, my view is that let's work collaboratively and ensure that we actually do the proper, first things first, proper planning and assessment, and make bold decisions. Let the project happen where it can be sustainable, not where it will actually please to increase numbers of people benefiting, and later on we register failure and we cannot go back to the projects. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, thank you very much. My name is Cedric Mujapelo from the Limpopo Department of Agriculture, the Acting Director for Animal Sciences. Thank you very much.
My apologies, colleagues. I would like the panel members just to, as they come to the podium, introduce themselves and to outline very briefly what your area of work entails at this point. So, Dr. Roos from Wageningen University, if you are ready to give us some perspective. I appreciate that Mr. Mojapelo has already given us some sense of the importance of evidence-based planning and detailed planning involving the relevant stakeholders are important elements towards the success in farmer development. Dr. Roos, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me and being able to listen to all these important and very interesting experiences you have with planning and with monitoring and evaluation. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just, two things I thought that for me, or actually three that stood out, what you were saying that I really appreciate. One is that you were saying we you know, you mentioned an example of the wool program where you really look at the long-term impact that may be developing during the course of the intervention. And I think that's very important, that, you know, you take also a long-term perspective in evaluating these larger programs, because, you know, change doesn't happen that quickly. So yeah, I just scribbled it down without having my glasses on. I thought what was really important, what you also did, was the indicators that you have been using for assessing poverty or improvement in livelihoods. Those are what I would call sensitive indicators, you know, sensitive to the context in which these programs have been developed with the farmers. So yeah, I thought that was very good. Another thing you have mentioned it's important in these type of programs to collaborate, to partner. And also I think it's something that stands out during all the discussions that we are having here, that it's so important to partner within government, but also outside of government with different partners in civil society and business and academia. One thing that you did not mention, perhaps I missed it, was the collaboration in planning, monitoring and evaluation. I think there's huge, you know, opportunity to make sure that when we work with different partners, with different target groups, to engage them, involve them in planning, monitoring and evaluation. I'm not going to have a whole speech, but I thought let me briefly share what I would call, you know, 3 suggestions for 3 important processes. The Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation helps with planning, and I think it's still very important, the planning, monitoring and evaluation. And I try to sort of capture my experiences with, you know, M&E in the food system sphere. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'll do this just now. So what are my experiences with planning, monitoring, evaluations, or the insights I got from that over the past decade or so, perhaps 2, are for planning. Well, let me start with evaluation. We often evaluate, you know, because we have a program of evaluations, we have a program of planning, and we need to be accountable and conduct evaluations every so many years. But what do we actually evaluate? For whom do we evaluate? Who are the users of the evaluation? Who are the ones that will be affected by the evaluation, both in the process of implementation and when there are results? So I think one important thing with evaluation is to really make sure that you know who is going to use this information, who will be affected by it, and how can we design an evaluation in such a way that it responds to the questions and the uses that people may have. Another one is try to evaluate real time, you know, so that you get insights while you are implementing, not only at the end, or not only in the beginning, or a midterm review of a program that lasts 6 or 8 years, right? So do it real time. Another one is really look for mistakes. Mistakes are great because we can learn from them. And we know we make mistakes, we make them all the time. It's only by doing that we learn. So also in our evaluation, look at the mistakes and understand why they were mistakes. Another one on monitoring. Try, you know, whilst monitoring, to engage people, involve people in the monitoring process, so that they do not feel, you know, looked at, but actually part of learning while implementation is going on. Another thing is we often are focused in our monitoring on a specific project, on a specific intervention, and we tend to forget to monitor the larger trends. The context within the intervention is taking, the context surrounding the intervention that is, you know, unfolding. So larger trends like prices, like droughts, like mobilization of actors, anything that could be really relevant for the intervention. Try to keep an eye on the big picture. Oh yeah, another one, and I think that's especially what, you know, the researchers amongst us would really like, is monitor also new knowledge. Are there new insights developed for the kind of interventions programs that we are working on. So not only focus on the intervention, but also on what new knowledge is coming out and how can we use that in, and then I come to planning, perhaps adapting our plans. We do M&E for learning, so we can use that in our planning. So adapt our planning, use our M&E information. Then that was with regard to what we call adaptive planning. Another one I mentioned, and all right. All our interventions, we have been talking about it a lot, are taking place in the food system or the agro-food system or the ecosystem. So when we plan, we need to think about not only, say, for instance, this case, the farmers and their livelihoods and how they could be improved, but also who actually influences that. The input providers, financiers, government, the neighbors, the other land users, training institutions, academia perhaps even. Who are the ones who engage with or influence or are affected by what these farmers will be doing or are doing? So a proper stakeholder analysis and looking at what kind of behaviors of these other actors influence or will be affected by the behavior change of the farmers, adopting new practices, investing in other types of crops, using more land or in a different way. Who will be affected by that? Who will have benefits or disadvantages because of that? And how do you think will they react? And then last one, so a food system is complex, many actors. The more actors, the more complex it becomes. So when planning, make sure that different actors in the food system are involved in your planning and share their perspectives of what change is needed and how it will happen. Now that was a bit of a lecture already. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Roos, for that insight. And the main points from that input is that we really need to evaluate the context or understand who do we evaluate for, what we evaluate for, and who uses this information, and that our evaluation ought to take place in real time, understanding and actually looking for areas where mistakes are being made, and also really understand who are the different role players. So, Mr. Tlatswayo, if we come back later, I would like to hear DPME's perspective on some of the points made by Dr. Roos. Could I get an indication if Dr. Mwangwela is ready for us online, and then we can go to her online presentation. Doc, I will come to the screen and just show you 5 minutes or so has expired. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Could I get an indication if Dr. Mwangwela is ready for us online? And then we can go to her online presentation. Doc, I will come to the screen and just show you 5 minutes or so has expired. Thank you.
Can I get an indication?
We are indeed ready for you. Please continue.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said, from Rivergo University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, a university in Malawi, and agriculture is one of our mainstay programs within the university. And from the discussions that we've had this morning, it is really important to look at the collaboration or the interaction between the academia and the government research system. Indeed, an earlier speaker mentioned that the ARC, for example, does not train for PhD or does not train to become a university, but they do play a very important role in supporting the academia because of the way these systems are set up. So from our experience with IWANA and our national agriculture research services, we found out that the collaboration is usually project oriented. So if there is a project, a particular activity, we work together. But the issue of planning and institutionalizing the collaboration has not been well established. So with that,
side with the agricultural production season. Sometimes it could be off season, but the students, that's the time that they have their break. So it's very important that as academia, we synchronize and align our student placement in their work with farmers so that they can benefit more in that season. Another area that our university has, but the students, that's the time engaging with farmers is through. So it's very important that as academia, innovation and incubation and align our this process has come up a lot with their work with farmers, so that where government has invested some resources to develop another area that among our young generation. That's the time and the process has been so that it's very important people as academia innovation and these ideas and align come to the this process has come up for a period of 1 year, so that where government develop their business.
Dr. Manguela? Dr. Manguela? Could I interrupt you, please? Dr. Manguela, can I interrupt you? Do you have potentially another device on your side, because we're getting a bit of feedback and there's also a bit of a delay. So if you could just speak to one or use one device, otherwise we're getting some feedback. Is that in order? A device on your side. If you could just speak to one or use one device, otherwise we're getting some feedback. Is that in order? Okay, sure. There's a bit of a challenge with the audio. We're going to come back to you, and then we can go on to our next speaker from the FAO, given that we have a time constraint. We're trying to catch up a bit. Our apologies, this does happen. Please.
Hello. Morning. I'm Getachew from FAO Sub-Regional Office. I work as a monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning specialist for the Sub-Regional Office based in Johannesburg. So, good morning and nice to be here, where academicians, multi-sectoral and multi-professional team come together, and it's really a pleasure to be here and on behalf of FAO Sub-Regional Office. So, yes, as a specialized agency on the agricultural sector, FAO usually encourages that the voice of our farmers, especially the smallholder farmers, is heard before any strategy is made, any policy dialogue is on board, and so on and so on. So I have heard from the previous presenter that, appropriate planning, monitoring, and evaluation is very key in this process across the value chain, across the agro-food system. And we encourage as ag specialized agency, as I've said. But how can we generate the evidence to inform the policy, for example, is the key question I wanted to address, especially on this podium. I might have very minimum experience in the sub-region, but the information hub for the agriculture sector in this region, including South Africa, is the extension system, the agricultural extension system. So it's good to question us somewhere as academicians, from theory background, to question how we generate evidence across the board, across the agricultural system. So usually our agricultural information system is based on the science, technology, innovation, research push, linear approach to the downstream, from top to up. So we want to go to the specific region just to diffuse technologies. We encourage the other way around as ag specialists, just so that the voice of our farmers heard and feed the system, and to generate evidence for policy dialogue, for program development and the strategy development in the agri-food system. Let me read one just a sentence. Yes, improving the impact of research, technology and innovation is not so much a question. So the question is how our smallholder farmers are influencing the policy process from bottom to up, from downstream to the upper stream. That is the basic issue. So we have to generate information in that process. So information could be different attributes at farmers level, at lower level. For example, for technology diffusion in the agriculture sector might be affected by different attributes like economic attributes, demographic, political attributes. My brother was presenting the issue related with the fertilizer and others. So political attributes also affect the environment. So we have to, our meal system should generate evidence from our farmers. Could be demographic, it could be political, it could be social, it could be any gender-related attributes that may affect the whole process. So it's good to empower our farmers and generate information from the lower level through the existing agricultural extension system. That is basically the key message I wanted to address. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much from FAO. I'm going to go to Dr. Nengovela. It seems we are almost ready to go back to our online participant, but let's finish with Dr. Nengovela. I've been requested colleagues to end the session at 11:10, I think I wanted to say. So, Dr. Nengovela, please come through, and then we'll go back to the online participant.
Thank you, Doc. I thought my time was already over, 10:11. But thank you so much for the opportunity to share. My name is Baldwin Nengovela. I use N at the department because when I got there, I found somebody using Baldwin. So at that side, they know me as Nkanizeni. I worked for the ERC for 18 years as a researcher and somebody very much on the ground. So we used to do a lot of projects that were at the ground level. So if you think of people who knows about on farm, on sites, on village, on type of research, we were the people who were part of that team. So I joined the Department of Agriculture, the Animal Production Directorate as a scientist manager there. And so my role sort of shifts to be not only focus on research and development, and now my also worry is policy. So one of the issues is that when I was looking at the CEO presenting the performance of the ARC, I was saying, where are the policy briefs in that chart of his? Because from where I sit, I want to get a policy brief that comes from KYD that says, okay, this is the time to introduce this in how we are implementing the government programs. So, but just to say, over the years, I sort of learned the philosophy of saying you could do research for outcomes. And I think the language of the outcomes had not been part of the government that time, some years back. And for many years, I always know how to design a project that talks to having very clear researchables, but also being able to realize bigger outcomes that we are worrying about in the country. And one of the issues that I've learned, which maybe is a conceptual framework that I will want to share with the group, is to say, when you are dealing with farmer development or agriculture, smallholder enterprise development, you are actually working with people who are trying to access different forms of capital. Sometimes they are looking for money, and there are stressors and shockers that comes in and between them and accessing money in their process of production. Sometimes they are looking for resources, water. So it's a system where there is a farmer sitting somewhere farming that product, and he's looking for these different forms of capital for this enterprise to work. It will be physical, financial, environmental, social, and in my years, we also added up what we call psychological capital, which has to do with, encouraging a person. Sometimes you don't have to bring money for the farmer to do. So what is also important out of that process is that you need to be sure of what type of intervention is needed. And I think one of our biggest problems in the country, in South Africa, has been thinking that every problem has to do with money. And all we do is provide money. And sometimes we think it's knowledge. And we all know that knowledge don't lead to behavior change. So it's not always times knowledge. People may have the knowledge, but not change their behavior or adopt a good practice. So the knowledge is there. So we all need to be thinking of what makes these people not adopt this. I mean, one of the issues that our crop colleague from DPME is talking about, people not maybe fertilizing. Just simple fertilizing. It's like feeding, giving food to something for it to grow. So is that not something that, it's a knowledge that we know it's already addressed in terms of having that knowledge. Knowledge is there. So we sit with big stocks of knowledge for most of the things. That should be helping with productivity or performances of our smallholder businesses. So that is one of the bigger philosophy. But I just wanted to say that one of the things that I've learned over the time is to treat the smallholder farmer in South Africa like any small enterprise. So you need to bring any tools you'll need to use if you are supporting an enterprise. We know that they are dealing with biological products and there are more risks. Then that's why governments are always involved with the farmers, because they're exposed to a lot of risks. So over the years we have learned that. But we also know we have got priorities that talks to what do we need to think of. So I just want to quickly share some type of projects we have done within the research, development, and a bit of policy environment. I won't start with, I'm tempted to start from all the way from KYD. So KYD, interestingly, it started as a project, and then it moved to a government program. And that's one of and it started as a project funded by RMRD, and then it slowly moved into what we call a program today. But one of the projects that I was involved in didn't involve farmers. It involved a situation where we were told, go to the communities on Tuesday or Wednesday in the villages. And when you go there, find the people that are there that should be at the workplace or at school. Ask them if they want to learn to do poultry farming. And we did go to communities, we'll consult with them and go away for 2 weeks and say, decide if you want to do this. And we will do it in your yard. We won't do it, we will do it in a yard or we'll do it as a group. You have a choice. And then you do that and we go away after 2 weeks, you come back. Those who wants to do it. So you're starting to incubate people who had no information about agriculture. Most of them thought, chickens, you feed them sawdust. I've seen somebody bringing sawdust. So that's where you are starting from that set of knowledge. But what is important there is from our side, it was a very nice environment to think of incubating from the start, where you are providing everything. You don't assume they understand farming. So you start by planning everything. And that involves also developing the infrastructure. And then they use the infrastructure. And from the use, then you look at how they sort of using it well, and then you study how they handle money when there's money. So, and what is that they need with that chain? Is it you linking them up with the poultry association or a bigger farmer or money or knowledge or in that case? But you also get, most environments we operate with farmers who have knowledge, prior knowledge. And part of it is that how do you facilitate unlearning best practices so that they can adopt new practices? So those are some of the challenges I think I see in the chairperson is, we didn't commit on the issue of time. Yeah, yeah. But those are the issues that I thought I would share. The issue of understanding that it's not, we don't have silver bullets, and I also like the way Prof. Strubel was presenting his story about systems. So there are systems at place. You also need multidisciplinary teams on the ground. You also need to also be ready to learn in the environment. So if you are operating in those environments, you need to be knowing that there's a place to, a lot of lessons to learn. So you need to also treat the site where you are so that you can develop the next tool. So one of the outcomes that came from that experience of going and talking to people on the ground to ask them if they want to farming is that over the years we have developed a small psychometric test to select farmers, because from that work we worked out a psychological profiles that deals with good business performance. And then if we had that tool that time, we could have used that to say, okay, you want to be in, do this 10-question toolkit. Out of that, could I work it out whether you will be committed to your work or not? So those are some of the things that I think will come over. But thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, we're going to move swiftly back to Dr. Manguela, and I just wanted to remind her of where she had left off before we had an interference. She made the point that it's important that when we have graduates placed or aligned or involved with farmers, that we should make sure that their placement also coincides with the season where they can actually learn something. So if I could ask the good doctor to take the next 4 minutes just to take us towards the end of her presentation, please. Thank you. Dr. Manguela, I think you may be muted because we don't hear you. Colleagues, whilst we're waiting for that, we will take 2 or 3 questions. So if you could think of your question, and perhaps we might not have time for all of your questions or comments. The speakers are obviously available still after this meeting, after this session, for you to engage them. So we don't want to unnecessarily restrict you, but we do have a time issue at this point. Would the technical people give me an indication if we are ready to continue with the input? Nope. Doc, we can see you, but we can't hear you. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, whilst that is still being sorted, can I get an indication if there's a comment, a question for the panel members? Is there a mic somewhere for your input? Comment? Doesn't look like it, panel. It's okay. Whilst that is being sorted, sure, please. If you know who you're directing the question towards, please do so. Otherwise, we will just give an opportunity for a general response. Thank you. I think you can continue. We will try to repeat the question.
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe my question is, what is the overall model for farmer support in South Africa? What is the overall model? I mean, what approach are we using? Are we using strategic partnership? Are we using extension workers? What is the overall model that we are using as a country for farmer support?
Okay. Any of our panel members, Dr. Nengovela, would you care to give an opinion?
I don't think we have a specific overall model at the moment. And at the moment, I think maybe it's a weakness in the whole system. But there's a, good question.
But I think there are obviously good approaches that we are following, and what has become clear that there are the issues around the partnerships, clearly bringing on board different role players. But I think the area where I think we have failed is trying to use the one size fits all, and not trying to really understand the other enablers that this farmer need. We often know that there are different influences that it takes careful maneuvering to shield a new entrant from such influences. But if it's environmental, there's very little you can do when there's a pest or disease incurrence or when there's a drought. So there are good practices, but there are areas that we can still do a bit of learning on. Colleagues, unfortunately, we are going to give up on our online participant. We're just not winning, so I am willing to take one more question. Please, sir, in front here. Yeah. Just wait 2 seconds for the mic. We'll.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the very stimulating discussion. My question is, in the presentation with the emphasis on smallholders, the earlier reference to climate change, cultural and social aspects, I haven't heard and related to the question the gentleman asked about the approach, I haven't heard any reference to the agroecological approach, which is now becoming a greater trend in terms of the elements dealing with a wide range from governance to climate change to water energy. So my question is this on the agenda of government and or ARC or any other bodies? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there somebody from ARC would like to reply? I don't want to give a reply as if I'm hogging the input. But I think in terms of the input coming from Dr. Strubel initially, when he explained the approach in terms of looking at the overall food system, there is a clear recognition that you can't but consider the agroecological approach. In government, we are doing some work in developing a clear policy on agroecology, and I believe ARC is also involved. But my understanding of the approach to the food system is that it cannot happen in the absence of the agroecological approach. I am to be guided if we are going to go back to the online. Not? Okay, sure. Colleagues, allow me to, in the last 4 minutes, to give you a brief rundown of the main outcome here. I think all of the panel members gave a clear indication that when we collab, there are different role players, and when we are collaborating, we must make sure that there is detailed role clarity amongst those. There is a lot of technical capacity. The actors know themselves. We have ARC, we have universities, we have other state-owned entities, and I think our challenge is to bring those together towards a common goal. When we are planning, I think the challenge there is really for us to ensure that we know what are we planning for. We are clear on the environment within which we are envisaging a particular outcome, and that we obviously then try to manage and bring on board our decisions in terms of being mindful of what the operating environment looks like. So we must know what the context is. And that context in South Africa is often very complicated. It is not homogeneous. So this is really an area that I think we need to stand still and clearly look at. Through our research, through our academic activities, I think, and our engagement with farmers, the evidence-based for our decision-making is there. Again, our challenge is to bring it together so that we have a consolidated approach towards assisting and developing our farmers. But colleagues, allow me to thank you for your input. To all of the panel members who have different roles, different experiences, thanks for sharing that. And we appreciate that even the outcome of this panel will again strengthen our approach or our intervention to support our farmers, and in particular, our approach to monitoring and evaluation. With that, I would declare this the end of this session, and I thank you for all your contributions. I will be guided by the organizers on the next steps. Thank you so much. Okay. Could I invite the next panel, Prof. Michael, if you could bring your panel, and the panel is Mr. Hale from Vanerpan, Dr. Nedna Nkwana from Dalrat, Mr. Eddie Golchak from Sanso, and Mr. Joseph Maslabi from Dalrat. And the session will focus on seed security and seed systems development. Thank you, colleagues.
Good morning once again, and thank you for holding up a little longer. We know we have time constraints, and this session comes between you and your tea break, so I'll try to be as brief and as quickly as possible in the proceedings. I also want to make a disclaimer that the subject that we are going to discuss today is a very broad, and we are not going to claim to exhaust subject of conversation this morning. Rather, the intention is, this is an important session, an important subject, especially in the context of food system transformation, because without seed system, there is no food system. So one directly influences the other, and therefore, this is an important subject for us to open the conversation, have a civilized discourse around the subject, and ultimately inform policy from an evidence-based point of view. Considering the diversity of the audience that we have, what I thought I would do was probably just bring a bit of context to the conversation through the lens of the, if I use some biological terms, that, the seed system has evolved over the years, and it also it has gone through quite a few forms of metamorphosis, and that really is a context within which we can discuss. For thousands of years, we had seed systems. They were household-based, they were community-based. Now we find ourselves into these multi-billion, multinational seed system institutions and companies. We also do understand that through those processes, breeding, genetic resource management, various international, regional, and national regulations came into play. And through those processes, the seed system really changed fundamentally in our food system globally. And that really doesn't always come up in a positive sense. In many ways, there are elements of society that are really not happy with the system. There are elements who also really advocate the current system is good and we need to proceed along those lines. Those squabbles, discourses, and discussions are really affecting our seed system policies. We have those who really see the advance of our knowledge in genetic resources management, in breeding, especially our capacity to go deep into the genetics of our crop and develop tailored varieties in the form of hybrids, genetic engineering. And then with that, the monoculture agriculture system, high input farming, and the effect that had into our agroecological system and how it affected the ordinary or the common seed and our ecological system. So to unpack all of this, I think we have one of the most qualified panel members, both from civil society, private sectors, public and government organizations from an operational point of view, from a legislative and legal and control point of view, as well as our day-to-day operational point of view. So we are, if I may start from my left-hand side, we have Mr. Francis Halle, who is from FANAPA, that is the Food, Agriculture, Natural Resource Policy Analysis Network. He is a Director of Advocacy and Communication with over 20 years of vast experience in private and civil society along those subjects. Also well-versed in the practical approaches and multi-stakeholder processes within the policy development system in the SIT system operations. Also with extensive practical knowledge and engagement at national and district or regional economic levels. He is also well qualified with qualifications ranging from business studies, communication, information, and knowledge management. And thank you and welcome, Mr. Halle, to the panel. And on my side, I have Mr. Joseph Mahlabe, who is a Director of Plant Production at the National Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. He is also a very experienced and seasoned professional within the plant production space in the National Department of Agriculture. He is an expert of sustainable agriculture. In his capacity as a director, he is responsible in overseeing the Plan Improvement Act and the various elements along those lines, as well as oversee the various elements that are used for the SIT system testing and certification. That means he has to work closely with Sansori and other SIT system organizations within the plant production implementation policies that are both at the national, provincial, and regional level, as well as stakeholder engagement within the knowledge and information management system. I also have immediately on my right, Dr. Nlutando Neta Nkwana. She is the Director for Plant Genetic Resources at the National Department of Agriculture. She is responsible for the development, implementation of national programs that are pertinent for genetic resources management. She represents South Africa in various national, regional, and international systems in formulating various laws and technical strategies pertaining to the FAO, the UPOV, the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, as well as the SADC Plant Genetic Resources system. So in the interest of time, I think she has a very long, colorful CV, so I would like to just summarize that such. We also have with us Eddie Goldschak, a seasoned professional within the SIT system, the man with more than 40 years of experience and who climbed from being a SIT inspection technician to all the way to a managing director within the SIT system. So he also represented South Africa in various national and international platforms, actively involved in the certification of the SIT systems, and as well as the movement and regulatory process of the SIT system. So we're discussing this thing in the context of South Africa as well as the region, ladies and gentlemen. So without the further ado, then I think I would leave the platform for my panel members. So in the interest of time, how we structured was for them to deal with various specific aspects of the SIT system. And I would start with you, Mr. Halle. Perhaps if you could briefly take us through some insight into the historical evolution of the SIT system within the region, the SADC region, particularly within the context of FANAPAN's work. If you could also just couple with that, you could share significant insights from the efforts of the South Africa. You know, how do we leverage your experiences, your policy engagement, and your overall roles and functions within the SIT system? Thank you.
Thank you. It's still morning. Good morning, everyone. I will also start with a disclaimer. I am not your panelist of choice. I am standing in on behalf of my CEO, who is away. But on this subject, whilst I'm not a technical expert, I happen to have the institutional memory, because my CEO would not have been there then. I'm slightly older than him, and at that time, I was a consultant supporting FANAPAN. 2003 marks the birth of the format that we are using for agriculture in Africa, which is the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program from the Maputo Declaration. And round about that time, SADC, our region, begins the consultative processes of thinking around seeds, because then there was the agency that had come from just signing this big declaration that we need a structured approach to develop our agriculture. And I remember that time I was working from outside. There were 11 national engagements that I attended. I also attended those, and 5 regional meetings that were building the momentum towards meeting of minds around seeds. Seeds have been there for thousands of years, but this was now the beginning of a process of trying to harmonize the processes on seeds in the region. By 2007, SADC, working with different organizations and consultants, had come up with the SADC protocols on seed. And it constituted of 3 different areas of focus. And the first one was the variety registration and release. It was designed as a middle of the road that all countries could align with. Note that countries did not have their own ways of doing things, but this was trying to bridge the gap and find a point for convergence. The second one was seed certification and quality control. The third one was phytosanitary and quarantine measures for seed. This is in 2007. And FANAPAN was still in its nascent stage. At this point, it was holding hands with SADC and doing the retailing, creating awareness, just bringing this to the center of conversation in the different countries. FANAPAN had been formed in Southern and Eastern Africa, so it was represented in all the 16 countries, 15 at that time, because the island state had not joined. In 2010, 7 years after the declaration in Maputo, an MOU was signed by all the ministers of agriculture in the SADC region to now start the operationalization of that SADC protocol. And all the countries except 5 did not sign. And they have not signed today. Policy change, policy development is an arduous process, and that is a reflection of how arduous it can be. In those countries, without pinning them down, I come from one of them, Angola, Madagascar, Mauritius, Seychelles, and Zimbabwe, for various reasons, have not signed up to today. And the FANAPAN intervention from 2010, because there was now an MOU, and FANAPAN was recognized as a technical body that joins the technical committees that operate before the ministers' summits, took an active role and selected 4 countries where it would start implementing a project to try and domesticate, align those countries' policies with the SADC protocol. And those countries were Eswatini, Swaziland then, Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was very adamant that seed was going to be political. You will remember our late president then declaring that no GMOs were going to come into Zimbabwe, and GMOs were directly attached as an appendage of the seed discussion. So the selection of Zimbabwe was also to learn what this resistance was structured from, what it was characterized from, and if it was going to emerge from any other African country, what would we learn from it and how would we deal with that? So FANAPAN then crafted and implemented a project which was the Harmonized Seed Security Project. And from it, with that 4-country study, the lessons would be drawn and then would be passed to the rest of the SADC countries. Today, what I can assure colleagues from South Africa and elsewhere is baseline studies were done to understand what those countries had prior to embracing or not embracing the SADC protocol. And these baseline studies indicated that there was different approaches across the different countries, but our borders are virtually imaginary. If you look at South Africa moving across the river into Zimbabwe, the Limpopo is a river. The ecology does not change mainly because you've crossed the river, but the seed developed for the southern part of the river could not find its way to the northern part of the river because we assume that's a border. So there was need to create that coming together, that harmonization, that would enable the seed to then move out of South Africa, for instance, into Zimbabwe. Or from seed developed for a particular ecological zone in South Africa that mimics the same in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, in Zambia, to be able to move without challenges. I would like to say again, policy development, policy implementation, and policy taking root is a very long and arduous journey. And today, so many years, this is 2024, so it's exactly 21 years after 2003. The challenges that were there are still there. And people are still haggling and talking and trying to see how best to bring everyone to that SADC harmonized protocol. There are resources that can be shared that people who are looking at seed in South Africa or any other country can also access. And FANAPAN in this process realized that capacity gap, handheld with national institutions to develop, in some instances, with attorney generals, departments to develop draft bills, with permanent secretaries of agriculture to sift out what their issues were. So the process of doing it exists. The documents that were generated and processes that were followed are available, and I will leave it at that at this point and come back should there be any questions that we can attend to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hall. I think not only within the SADC, but we also have quite a number of international codes of protocol that really support harmonization and coordination of policies, and I hope we would align ourselves to those protocols and perhaps how they operate. I think Dr. Noluthando will educate us on those aspects. But coming back to South Africa, my second speaker would be Director Mhlave. I think what I would ask him to elaborate to us is that we know, those of us who are doing research and interacting with farmers, effective and well-coordinated seed production, dissemination, and governance are often considered as the pillars of any production system. So how inclusive is our current seed system, and how do you really rate or describe the South African seed system in this context, and if it is, whether it's adequate enough in terms of its diversity and its mode of operation? Maybe you could just give us some light on that, please. Thank
you. Thank you very much, Dr. Pairo. And good morning once more, colleagues. I'm Joseph Mhlave from TALRAT as the Director responsible for crop production. The issue of seed production is a very complex one, but I'm going to try to simplify it before I can even assess in terms of my comments with regard to issues of governance. The seed production is the process with the many steps. What I'm trying to say, the key one, which is fundamental, is research. And the second one, which is a core, is a breeding. And after breeding, we've got the production. And after that, of course, we need to have the certifications. And the issues of post-handling also comes into picture, and also marketing. And after all, we've got all those steps which are interconnected, we'll have the seed security. And I'd like to start in terms of how fortunate we are as, for example, South Africa and the department, because in terms of the research, we've got our implementing wing, which is
ARC, and other tertiary institutions which play a role in that particular space. And in that regard, I think they play a major role ensuring that we can have food sovereignty and also agriculture biodiversity. Secondly, because in terms of issues of breeding is very critical, so that we've got the supply of new varieties which will be able to assist us in terms of coping with the calamities of maybe issues of drought and any other matter in order to improve our production efficiency. And after that, once we've got all those, then we can be able to have a production. But before that, as government or the Directorate Plant Production, together with other units, particularly Director Genetic Resources, what we do, any new variety which is being developed, we put it through the process and evaluate it in terms of DOS. DOS is the system we use, which it will be, DS means to distinguish whether that variety is different from others, particularly the mother plant. And secondly, we also evaluate it in terms of uniformity and also make sure that it's clearly sustainable. And once it goes through that system, which is going to be repeated in 2 seasons, is then we can be able to list that particular variety. What do we mean about listing? Which means we give assurance also to the consumer that this is a new variety, and that variety is being tested in terms of making sure it's different from others and it's also suitable for certain areas. Therefore, then production can be able to kickstart. But what we do, because the other part, it was mainly on the part of trade control, but you need to be able to take responsibility. And taking responsibility, what we do, because in terms of the sector is huge, together with the industry, we've established the certification schemes. And in this case, we've established the certification scheme, which is responsible for agronomic and vegetable crops. And that scheme is SANSO. AD is here, I think will be able to give a fair share in terms of their contribution in that regard. And in terms of potatoes, we've already established a potato certification scheme, which is responsible for seed potatoes. And in terms of horticulture, we've got the scheme responsible for deciduous and also vineyards. And we've got other scheme, which is still in the pipeline, which is a citrus improvement scheme, which of course it has been in the sector for long, but we're in the process of formalizing it, making it more compulsory, so that we can be able to have a clean material available in the sector. And after that, what we normally do in terms of those certification schemes, they are responsible to set the quality assurance system to ensure that all seed producers comply with the quality assurance, which we can give confidence to our farmers that the seed which we procure from seed sellers is of a good standard. And we're not only there because those seed producers, they've got the premises which we regulate, where they do the cleaning and the packaging of those. We've got those standards to make sure that those facilities, they are registered and continually inspected and sampled. And we've got official seed testing laboratory to make sure that whatever is being produced there comply with the set standard. And that, of course, is also linked to the issue of marketing. And here comes the question in terms of how do we make sure that all the farmers, they are catered? Because when you look at most of our farmers who are on the other side of the periphery, they've got a problem in terms of resources. And what we do as government or as the department, we're embarking on the system to ensure that we've got the community seed multiplication scheme to ensure that there are seeds available for them, which will be at an affordable rate. And we are not only there, the chairperson this morning highlighted on the issue of the super partner. I also have my own super partner who will also render a service in terms of ensuring that those communities, they've got the community seed banks,
And not only community seed banks, they are also responsible for the National Gene Bank in ensuring that all genetic material are preserved for future generation. And that is the service we offer. And in terms of assessing and rating ourselves, as the facilitator indicated, I'll say maybe that it will be for FundPan and others in terms of the role we play, in terms of issues of harmonization when we trade with our neighboring countries, particularly with SADC. They know in terms of an international platform, how do we really perform in terms of ensuring that South Africa, we've got a seed security. And what I can assure you is you don't have to be worried, because the subject on its own is also a little bit political, but in terms of the systems which are in place, going back to also the breeding program, which we are running with ARC and other tertiary institutions, we are bringing in either as a hybrid and also OPV, which most of the agrological farmers, they are very much interested in, that we've got at least enough supply. But not only there, we've got also our own teething issues, but we are working on it, ensuring that we've got enough supply in terms of open pollinated varieties. In a nutshell, facilitator, Dr. Bairo, I can assure you that our rate, our SIF, far above average, but it will be up to not only our local farmers, but also up to the international players. They will be able to give that input. But South Africa, the flag is flying very high. In a nutshell, I think that's my summary in terms of my contribution.
Thank you, Joseph, for taking us through those step-by-step processes of seed production, from the genetics to research, breeding, identity testing, multiplication and distribution. I think it's much appreciated. You also did mention about the various seed schemes, and perhaps along those lines, we know those seed schemes are governed by the Plant Improvement Act. And like many other countries in the world, South Africa also follows the various laws governing the movement of genetic resources. Along those lines, maybe as a custodian, Dr. Noluthando, do you think the current policies are inclusive enough to ensure national seed security, as well as to allow diverse seed system development in the country? Also, if you could also just give us a light on, do we really need to undertake some kind of policy gap analysis? Are there shortfalls in our current system? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. And good morning, everyone. Prof, I think the past 2 days, a lot of speakers have alluded to the seed systems that we have in South Africa. We have the formal seed system. Thank you. The formal seed system, which is characterized by modern varieties as well as varietal identity. Also, the formal seed system relies on the formal varietal release and registration system, as alluded to by Mr. Mahlabe. On the other side, we have our farmers' seed systems. And these systems are characterized by traditional varieties or land races. They're heterogeneous in nature. Seed saving and seed exchange is a cornerstone for these farmer seed systems. Now, central to both seed systems, we have plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. These are very important as they are building blocks for crop production, food security, and also to address environmental challenges, including climate change that we've heard a lot about the past 2 days, and also for research, breeding, and cultivation. The challenge that we are having is the erosion of these genetic resources. And if we lose them, that will have a negative impact on food security. So globally, the importance of these genetic resources have been recognized. We have instruments that talk to the conservation and sustainable use of these genetic resources, as well as fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their use. From the agricultural side, we have the FAO. The national focal point for the FAO is DALRAD, and DALRAD represents South Africa in the meetings of the Commission on Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, and also on the meetings of the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. And the national programs based on these instruments are conducted by gene banks in the country, especially the NPGRC, as well as the ARC gene banks, the community seed banks, as well as on-farm and in-situ programs. The challenge that South Africa is having, which I can mention as one of the policy gaps, Prof, is that South Africa has not yet acceded to the treaty. However, we are in advanced stages. We need to fully participate in matters of the treaty. Again, we have the CBD, of which the national focal point is the DFFE. They are also the national focal point of the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing. And this is implemented nationally through the NIMBA Act. Now, Prof said I should highlight the gaps. Us not being the full members of the treaty means that we are not fully participating in issues around bioprospecting, access and benefit sharing, as well as issues around farmers' rights, as we know that the treaty is the only instrument that recognizes farmers' rights. There are also cross-sectoral matters such as digital sequence information. Yes, the NIMBA does have PAPS regulations that deal with access and benefit sharing. However, the treaty excludes all species, rather the NIMBA excludes all species that are listed in Annex 1 of the treaty. Where does that leave us? It means that we don't really have an access and benefit sharing regime for plant genetic resources for food and agriculture that are listed in the treaty. Also, even if South Africa were to accede to the treaty, there will still be gaps because the NIMBA only deals with indigenous biological resources and the treaty deals only with the species that are in Annex 1. So there will be species that are not covered by either instrument. Now, having dealt with conservation, our seed systems also involved variety registration, which is very important because we know that breeding is extensive, is a very extensive process. Almost every speaker yesterday, particularly the head of departments, they mentioned the need for the development of new varieties, particularly for challenges regarding to climate change. Now, internationally, we have the International Union for the Protection of New Plant Varieties, which provides for the plant variety registration system, which offers a form of an intellectual property protection system in a form of a plant breeder's rights. In South Africa, this is under the Plant Breeders' Rights Act. Now, the conditions that a variety should conform with to be registered under the system. Joseph Matlaba has mentioned this. They need to be new, distinct, uniform, and stable. And these conditions are for the granting of intellectual property protection in a form of a plant breeder's right or for variety listing. When we look at the Plant Improvement Act, it also deals with issues of seed certification. Eddie and Joseph are here for that part. Now, again, when we look at policy gaps regarding this variety registration system, we will note that the regulatory framework tend to favor the formal seed systems. We need to balance between the breeders' rights and also the farmers' rights, which is quite a challenge globally. We need to strengthen the farmer seed systems, and there has been some calls for us to develop a system for registration and protection of farmer varieties. It's not as easy because when we consult, there are farmers who feel that if we introduce the registration and protection of farmer varieties, it means we will now regulate them. And then there are farmers who feel strongly that no, we need to develop the registration system for registration and protection of farmer varieties. What do these gaps mean? It means that we need to have a national dialogue. We need to strengthen collaboration with our partners, particularly the farmers who are custodians of the PGRFA, the civil society organizations. We work with some of them in the country, like your BioWatch, Seed Knowledge Initiatives. They are very key because they really analyze our policies. They give us positive criticism and some recommendation. We do have a healthy debate with our civil society organizations. We need to work with provincial departments of agriculture. Dr. Chikolomo, thank you. And also the DFFE. I've mentioned that they are national focal point for the Nagoya Protocol. They've just developed a white paper on conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. So they deal with issues of access and benefit sharing as well. We do have an MOU and with the DFFE, and we are hoping that will strengthen our collaboration with them. We have the DSI, they are the custodian of the Indigenous Knowledge System, and also the National Recordal System. Also under the DSI, there is a biodiversity biobank, South Africa, which is the network of South African gene banks. Both the ARC and the DALRAT are core gene banks under this network. We need to work with the research institutions like the ARC. DDG mentioned the SLA we are having with the ARC yesterday. And we need to really focus on collaboration so for us to be able to close these gaps. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Noluthando. Yeah, I think we were talking about regional harmonization, but considering various legislation even sit in various departments in South Africa, there is also a need for national harmonization, not just regional. So, yeah, I think now we would perhaps go back to the operational nitty-gritty of the various things. I think we have heard about the various developmental and policy issues and the production issues, as well as some legislative and framework that deals with systems. We know in South Africa our certification systems are managed through SANSOR, that is South African National Seed Organization. We have Eddie here, fortunately, to get us through some of those complex processes, but to help him understand, to help us understand those all things, I think what I would pose a question to you, Eddie, is that does the current system have shortcomings in terms of its certification or other processes, especially from the role of the farmers? What do you think is the role of the farmers, irrespective of size, in contributing to our system development? And also, if you could explain this to us in the context of, one, the role of multinational seed companies, how both from the negative as well as the positive end of it. I also want you to delve into, we know the limitation within multinational seed companies that they deal with a handful of commodities. How does SANSOR see this from the context of its effect in broadening our food base? The fact that we don't have many food crops growing, a seed is always mentioned as a limiting factor, and the seed companies are always focused on a few commodities. So what is the way forward, in your opinion, along those lines? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's still morning, it's 12 minutes until noon. So, yes, I'll try to answer the questions as best as I can. Farmers, of course, play a very important role in food security. They are the producers of food. Without farmers, there won't be any food. And we also need farmers to produce seed to provide to those farmers to produce their food. So farmers play a critical role. And it doesn't need to be a mega farmer or a big commercial farmer to do seed production. It can also be done in communities. So we had a very successful story, and is still continuing in the Limpopo province, where community seed production is done in villages, where all the villagers on their half an acre would plant OPV with, of course, the cooperation with all the other small farmers in the region or in the immediate vicinity to make sure of the isolation requirements and so on. So any farmer can be a seed producer as long as they're willing to follow the procedures. I was not asked to talk about certification, but since it has been mentioned here several times, of course, SANSOL is a national designated authority for seed certification, only not for the other crops like potatoes and deciduous fruits and so on. So we work according to OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They have their seed schemes. So South Africa has been participating in those schemes since 1960 already. So our national certification scheme is based on that. So when we certify seed, when we issue that certificate, we certify that this variety that you buy is indeed that variety, and 99.9% of that seed in that bag would be of that variety, within certain limits depending on the generation. So seed certification is voluntary. You don't have to do it in South Africa if you don't want to. But a breeder can decide for himself if they want to make certification of their specific variety obligatory, and then it is just published in the Government Gazette in the new Table 5, currently Table 8 of the Plant Improvement Act, and from then on only certified seed of that variety is concerned. So there's many times a misconception by the public, if they buy seed from a seed company, that seed is certified. That is not the case. Certification means it has gone through this seed certification scheme, and SANSOL in the end issued the certificate to guarantee that seed is certified. So you must look out for the blue label and the certification seal. So on the label it will state this is a South African certified seed. Coming back to the farmers, also mentioned by Dr. Nolatondi here about breeding of new varieties. So anybody can be a breeder, also a smallholder farmer. We have many companies, farmer companies in SANSOL that has bred their own varieties. It doesn't have to be done by multinationals or breeding institutions and so on. So anybody that identifies a new variety and it complies with the requirements for a DUS, then it can be variety listed, and then it can be marketed in South Africa. So, as I mentioned, the farmers do play a critical role. I think the current system in South Africa is adequate. It works very well. There's just certain procedures that you have to follow in the end to be able to market a variety. If you follow that system, there's some red tape involved and some fees, but it levels the ground for everybody. Everybody has to comply with those requirements. So in the end, the farmer benefits from it because they would know that the varieties that they buy comply with certain minimum requirements. The role of multinationals, of course, is very important. Well, we have many multinational companies in South Africa. Many of the companies that started off in South Africa turned into multinationals because they had to broaden their horizons. South Africa has only that big market for seed, and if they want to make a profit or expand, they have to go abroad. And so many of our companies operate in Africa. And of course, many of the big international, multinational companies bought into South Africa. And with that, they introduced new genetics. And it also helps with food security. Should there be a shortage of any seed in South Africa, they can quickly move it from their home countries to South Africa. So one problem that we have in getting new genetics into South Africa, especially in the light of climate change, is the legislation. Of course, those multinational companies would want to have adequate protection for their varieties. So Plant Breeders' Right is there to protect the rights of the breeder. So if your Plant Breeders' Rights Act does not provide sufficient protection, then the international companies won't bring the new genetics to South Africa. Also, things like getting a new trait, or in the case of gene editing, where GMO is not involved, it's just cutting out some genes from well, not genes, some traits from a specific gene, still remaining, not introducing any new material from any other organism, then it doesn't qualify for GMO. So to require that new varieties must go through millions, hundreds of millions of rands of trials to get it approved would just delay the introduction of those new genetics into the country by many years. Let me see what I had so many questions. Okay, the question on the seed sector only supplying a limited amount of or number of crops. I think in Sansol, if you look at our annual report, you'll see we report on more than 100 different crops that our member companies produce and sell. And of those 100 crops, there are hundreds of more varieties of those specific crops. It is true that the multinationals only concentrate on a few big crops where they can make a big profit out of. But we do have companies also dealing with the other crops. As long as there is a demand, then the seed sector will respond to it. If there's a demand for cowpeas or bambara nuts or other indigenous vegetables that the people would like seed of or new varieties of, then the seed sector will respond to that. But of course they have to make a profit. It's very expensive to produce new varieties. There's much of research involved. So in the end, the investment must justify, or the return must justify the investment. Okay, I think, did I miss something, Mr. Chair? Everything right? Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, panel members. That concludes the presentation by the panel members. But if I close this session without giving a chance or two for the audience, I wouldn't be doing it any justice. As much as I'm going to irritate my fellow coordinator, I would provide a maximum of 3 questions, one from the right end, one from the left end, and one from the middle. Maximum 3 questions. But you are welcome to interact with the panel members during lunch and tea, please. Going once? 3 questions max. Going once? Going, yes? One from the middle.
Okay. My name is Abde from ARC Vegetables Industrial and Medicinal Plants. Thank you so much for your nice presentation and talk. My question is, we are working with, the ARC is working with Department of Agriculture closely with small-scale farmers, including the community seed bank. So these community seed banks, they have different species of crops where they are storing there. So my question is, what support is the national department giving to the community seed banks in training and also infrastructure, because we need to sustain the seeds which are stored in the gene bank. Thank you.
Okay. By the look of things, your question is direct to our colleagues from the National Department of Agriculture. The question is, what do we have community-based seed banks which we need to sustain and support, and in what form can the department provide those support? Maybe any one of you can answer, Joseph or Noluthando. Noluthando, maybe that's closer to your subject. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. The community seed banks are our pride as DALRAT, particularly the NPGRC. We do support the community seed bank through mostly we are providing technical support. But what I would like to use, I'd like to use this opportunity perhaps to call upon the provincial departments of agriculture to please, I don't want to say adopt, because when we establish the community seed banks, we are doing that in partnership with the provincial departments of agriculture as well as traditional authorities. Now, I'm sure you'll agree with me that if as national, we just establish a community seed bank with the hope that we'll forever go back to the province, hoping that that community seed bank will be sustainable, I don't think that will work long term. We would like the provincial departments of agriculture and the communities to take ownership of those community seed banks for them to be self-sustainable. Yes, we are continuing to provide support. We are willing to provide even financial support in cases where we have donor funding. But the key word is they must be self-sufficient and self-sustainable. In order for them to reach that level, communities themselves, as well as PDAs, must take ownership of those community seed banks. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Noluthando. I think perhaps to provide practice well, we've just closed a project International and the National Department of Agriculture Plant Genetic Resources Center, where we have developed, trained and equipped 3 model seed farmers approach in the whole idea of translation and stuff like that. So perhaps I want to really re-emphasize the provincial department, especially the extension agents, to come on board on those activities. Thank you very much. I think this is a very important subject. This side? Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. One is, what goes to community seed banks, the hybrids or the seeds that the farmers eat, and who controls of? Yes.
No, I got your question. What the question is, what type of seed goes into the community seed bank? Are these hybrids or not? Perhaps let me abuse my authority and answer that question. The purpose of the community seed bank is an extension of natural resource conservation, and it is purely focused on land races and local collections. It is not hybrids. We do everything in our capacity to try and make sure that there is no hybrids around there, to try and avoid genetic contamination, or what is correctly called by Joseph, genetic erosion. So to prevent genetic erosion, we exclusively focus on local collections and land races. Those are the only crop cultivars that go into those community gene banks. Thank you. One last question and I'll close off. Thank you very much for your attention. I think I would provide a written report for the coordinators in the interest of time. I don't want to stand between you and your tea break. I think I would like to take this opportunity to hand over back to the owner of this morning session, Dr. Prof. Bagani. Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We pretty much done. I won't say more than just a slight adjustment to our program. You can see that the next session is called Research Papers Sessions. It is composed of 3 themes. Theme number 1 on climate smart, value chain number 2, and One Health number 3. We were supposed to start this particular session around now at 12 o'clock, 11:55 to be precise. Just to save time, we are really humbly and politely asking you to grab your coffee, go via the posters on your way to your parallel session as soon as you can. If we can start that by 12:30, I think we would have done some justice. Remember that we still have to have lunch, so the quicker we start the parallel session, the better. So the coordinators of the parallel sessions are going to be found in the rooms. I think theme number 1 is here, correct? Yes. Number 2 is in the orange, it is probably tent number orange, number 2. Can you confirm? It's the marquee just behind us on your way to your coffee. And the green One Health theme 3, further down closest to the coffee place. 1, 2, 3. Bias Maklak. Danki. Thank you. And a big applause for the panelists and the coordinators. Thank you very much, and see you at lunch. Oh, next session.